Hello from warm and sunny California. We're here today at the Peter Sagan VIP Grand Fondo, which is a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club of America. I'm going to be test riding the new Specialized Roubaix with its Future Shock front suspension. Now this is a bike we at Bike Radar have been testing quite a bit. My colleague Warren rode it in Belgium on the cobbles and has been riding around in England. I've been rallying a bike on the dirt roads of Colorado, but I'm curious to see how this bike handles on the silky smooth roads of California, where we'll be riding in Malibu, up and down some canyons, and along the Pacific coast.
A few of us were on Specialized Roubaix demo bikes with the Future Shock. Many riders, including Peter, did the same thing when stopped at a light or a rest stop. They'd press down on the bars and feel the 2 centimeters of travel and the spring-loaded return. It doesn't take much force to get the bars to bob up and down on the steer. And when you're just standing there at a stop, it feels kind of weird. Speaking of weird, there's no getting around the aesthetics. The Future Shock looks like a giraffe in a turtleneck. Once on the road though, the bike's front end doesn't feel different most of the time. Even when riding on smooth roads and watching it bobbing along, it doesn't feel unstable. Honestly, when you don't look at it, you can't really tell that it's moving. When hitting abrupt hard bumps, you can definitely feel it move, but not necessarily in a bad way. Like a mountain bike fork, it dives under hard braking. This is an odd sensation to have on a road bike when the bars drop by a centimeter or two. Now you have to compare this bike to the Trek Domane. It has a steer tube that bows fore and aft, and an integrated seat tube seat mast that does the same thing. The Roubaix's rear end is similar, with the long CGR post flexing generously, and it's bolted way down on the seat tube for extra movement. The Roubaix's front end is totally different, of course. There's no fore-aft movement. It's totally rigid. The movement is vertical. It's been compared to mountain bike suspension, but that's not quite accurate. Mountain bike forks allow the front wheel and the fork to move, suspending the front end of the bike. Since the Future Shock is higher up on top of the head tube, it suspends the rider's arms and torso. Anything that hits the front wheel still makes its way up through the fork and into the frame. Now, when I'm approaching rough terrain, whether it's a pothole or some rocks, my instinct is to stand up or at least unweight the saddle a little bit. And on the Roubaix, maybe you should just stay seated. Sure, the bars will move to absorb, but you can still feel the hits at the pedals, as the bottom bracket and frame area is very stiff. Somewhat similar to the Domane, if you stay seated, the long CGR posts definitely deflects the bumps. So the bike's stiff bottom bracket. It feels like a tarmac to me, honestly. There's plenty of snap, and it feels easy to climb on, especially with the stock compact crank and the 1132 cassette that this bike comes with. At the Sagan Fondo, we did the 7-mile Mulholland Drive climb twice. I was grateful to have the low gear to spin that last mile at 6% when guys started to push the pace and gravity started to put the hurt on me. Dropping down the winding Decker descent, the Roubaix felt pretty great. With a relatively low bottom bracket and wide, grippy tires, the bike was easy to lean back and forth through the S-bends. On a bike like this, on roads like this, hydraulic brakes feel like a great big duh. Yes, of course, you can get descend on rim brakes. I've done it before and will do it again many times. But being able to do hard decelerations with a single finger on each lever just feels right. Put another way, going back to a rim brake and grabbing hard with 4 fingers feels a little primitive. In any event, the California descents all had bot dots, those little domed reflectors in the center of the road. For cars and riders alike, they serve their purpose. You can clearly see and feel the center of the road that you should not cross. Hitting them on a bike at speed and lean into corner is a little sketchy. I intentionally hit them a few times on the bike just to see what would happen. While the vibrations were certainly present, it was more like, I probably shouldn't do that, instead of the typical, oh, don't crash, don't crash, don't crash. Another weird looking but functional thing on this bike is the SWAT box. The multi-tool tucks into the outside compartment, and then a tube, CO2 lever, and CO2 breaker fits into the box, which pops open and out for access. I generally dig the concept of the integrated storage, especially when it's tucked straight into a down tube, like on the Stump Jumper mountain bike. And if you don't like how it looks, you can just take this thing off. The rest of the spec on the Ultegra Di2 bike is a mix. I'm not a fan of a saddle, but that's always a personal preference. The flattened top of the handlebar is great, especially for this type of bike, as is the short reach and the shallow drop. The riser part of the bar, I still think it looks weird. So, for the Roubaix platform as a whole, Specialized has walked away from the rubbery zerks attached to the frame or the fork and replaced it with some straight-up suspension up front and a long bending seat post at the rear, which, as a matter of fact, does have a little bit of zerks tucked into the Cobra-like bend up at the top. So back to the Future Shock. Yes, it looks weird. And yes, when you're standing around in a parking lot, it feels weird. But once you're out on the road, it doesn't feel that strange at all. And after the 85 miles and about 7,500 feet of climbing for the Sagan Fondo, my shoulders and neck weren't tight at all. So, surprise! It turns out suspension on a bicycle works. Somebody should go tell those mountain bike riders. they could really benefit from something like this. Stay tuned for a head-to-head comparison of the Trek Domane and the Specialized Roubaix.